Welcome to the You Were Designed for Greatness podcast. Each week we will bring you inspiring tips, stories, and ideas to help you be all that you can be, discovering your greatness. Featuring Donna Tashton. Donna is a transformational life and health coach, a highly sought-after public speaker, and the founder of Vibrant Living. She has helped hundreds find a better life, free of stress and living the greatness they were truly designed for. And now, your host, Donna Tashton.
This is Donna, and I would like to welcome you to podcast number 42. We have a very special guest today, and stay tuned at the end. I have a free gift for you. So without further ado, let's dive into the interview. Good morning, good morning. This is Donna Tashton, and it is morning when I am recording this. And I have a special guest today, Elyse Wild. I have been admiring her work and the things that she's doing from a distance, and she just didn't know it. And so we finally able to connect together in person, and I have her as a guest on my podcast. Elyse, would you say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. That was such a sweet introduction. That just made my heart swell. Thank you so much.
It is very true. Why don't you tell people what you do and a little bit about yourself?
So I am the editor of Women's Lifestyle Magazine. It is a publication local to West Michigan. It's been around for, I think we're coming upon our 22nd or 23rd anniversary. It is the greatest job in the whole world. It's what I've always wanted to do. In my daily work, I get to just make contact with really amazing women and people in our community and tell the stories about what they're doing within our community to just make it a better place. And it's just been the honor of my life. I love it so much. I've grown so much as a person in the 4.5 years I've been doing this.
Awesome. So Women's Lifestyle Magazine, that is an amazing publication. So let's learn about the women behind the magazine. Tell us about you.
Well, currently I am 32. I live in Grand Rapids with my husband. We have a couple of cats. We love to travel. And as I said, most of my days I spend working on the magazine, making contact with people to schedule interviews and tell their stories. But beyond that, at the beginning, I grew up in Grand Rapids. I actually grew up like a mile and a half away from the house I live in right now. So that's kind of funny. And I grew up with 4 siblings. So there's 5 of us in a really beautiful house in Ottawa Hills that my great-grandpa left my mom. And the house is still in our family. And we had a pretty, my parents are like such wonderful people, but we had a pretty chaotic childhood. I think maybe that could be accounted for just the sheer number of us kids
That's
in the family. Yeah. But I've always loved to read and write. It's been something that has just been a consistent thread throughout my life. Like at sleepovers, I would make sure to take a backpack full of books so that I could have the option of escaping into a book, which also probably speaks to a little bit of social anxiety that I must have had as a kid. I've always written, I've always kept a journal, and I've always kind of written in a journalistic style as well. Even as a kid, like I never pictured myself necessarily like writing books or novels. Like I always wanted to write articles. So that's been a constant throughout my life. And it's been a journey to get here, to get to a place in my life, in my career where I get to do this. And it's so incredibly fulfilling. I come to a loss for words to describe how good it makes my heart and soul feel that what I do matches with that's inside of me.
I love that when we actually begin to do what our heart passion is and our dreams are, and when that happens. But if you're like most of us, there was a journey to get here. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen necessarily easily, I'm guessing, because it didn't for me. to be able to. So why don't you tell us some about your story?
Sure. So something I enjoy sharing with younger people in particular is that I did not graduate from high school. I had a really hard time in high school, academically and, being focused. And I think, looking back on it, I believe I struggled with depression, which at the time I think you would just perceive me as like a surly a grumpy teenager. But now looking back on it, I think I was having some serious problems with depression. When I was 17, the week after my 17th birthday, I found out that I was pregnant and I had an abortion, with the support of my mom. And strangely enough, it was during that time and in that circumstance. Prior to that, my mom and I really had a hard time getting along, which I think can be typical of teenage daughters and their mothers. Mm-hmm. But during that time, when we discovered I was pregnant and she really let me make that decision, and she provided me with the resources to make the decision. She found a woman that went to her church who had experience with having an abortion and who also had given up a child for adoption and who also had her own child. So that she had, that she kept and had custody of and was raising. So she arranged for this woman and I to have lunch. And this woman, I'll never forget how wonderful this was. She just let me ask her all the questions in the world. And we just ate cheese and crackers and sandwiches. And, it was a really amazing thing that my mother thought to give me at that time. So during that time, prior, my mom and I had not gotten along. And then during this intense situation where we had to figure out what to do, I became like a little kid. Like I needed her. Like we got along. We were totally in alignment. We were closer than we had ever been before, for this brief period while we were figuring out what to do. So anyways, that, although I stand by that I made the right decision, and it was, it's a decision I have peace with, and I know that it was right for me. And, I took a lot of time and consideration and as much as a 17-year-old can, but recovering from that emotionally is not something I think I was prepared for. I don't think my mother was prepared for it. I don't think that's something that is addressed in that situation. When you're having that procedure, I don't think you really think about what happens afterward. What do you do afterward? What happens to that? You're literally losing something. You're at a loss, even if it's something you maybe weren't aware of. It's right. It can be really difficult. And as a teenager, it was difficult. And I think that I really struggled into my early 20s as a result of dealing with those feelings and dealing with how that felt.
What advice would you have for someone who may have had a similar situation and are suffering silently?
My advice would be find a place to share. Find, whether it be a trusted friend or a family member or an anonymous posting board on a website. Anyway, sharing is like an absolute must. I found a lot of healing in that, in sharing, but also getting into therapy. A lot of the feelings I had afterward were, and I struggled with this for a long time without necessarily being aware that I was struggling with it. You think, if anyone knew this about me, no one would ever love me. And that's a really hard place to live. That, thinking that if people knew your true self, quote unquote, you would be completely unlovable and not valued at all. And also I would prompt people to recognize, even though, however far along you are, whatever your life situation is, however much you were aware or not aware of that pregnancy, give yourself time to mourn, put some grieving processes into your life so that you can, because even if you feel like it will come up at some point, even if you feel like you have peace immediately, it's going to come out, whether it be in a few weeks, a year, 20 years. Give yourself some structure put your grief into.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stuff feelings don't go away.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't. They have to be
Yeah.
shared and processed. So stuff feelings don't. Thank you for being so brave to share something that is controversial, and people listening to this will have all kinds of opinions about that kind of thing, and they do. But what never changes to me is the crisis that women find themselves in, making very hard decisions. And I had a teenage pregnancy, but chose to have her, and that created different problems. So we all have our struggles that we have to process, and compassion and love for each other, forgiveness for others and ourselves, is so part of the process. So thank you for being brave enough to share that with.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for giving me the space to share that. I really appreciate it.
So what influence did your grandma have in your life?
Oh, so my grandma, my grandma's name is Loretta Sailors. Some people locally may know her. She was a watercolor artist for most of her life, and she lived to be 93. And she taught watercolor classes here in Grand Rapids out of the basement of her home since the 80s. And she amassed a large following of really wonderful students. And my grandma and I have always been really close. She always encouraged my writing and reading and the creative sides of me. She'd always give me a journal for Christmas or my birthday, and then I would fill that journal up, and then she'd give me a new one, the next occasion. And she was this really tenaciously positive person. Like, she met the world with so much positivity and but not naivety. Like, she was a very wise person. She wasn't naive to the realities of life. And she and my grandpa lost a young daughter to suicide before I was born. But that was that was a huge event in her life and in their lives.
Right.
So she went through a lot of stuff, but she was just so positive, and she found joy in she found joy in the minutia of life. Like, when we would eat pancakes or waffles with her, she would say, "Aren't these waffles so beautiful? Isn't this so fun?" And just for saying that, I would just be like, "Yeah, this is fun. These are beautiful waffles. This is great. This day's awesome." And she carried that attitude throughout till the end of her life. And unfortunately, she passed away a week before my wedding in 2018. And my grandpa had passed away a couple of weeks before that. And I truly believe that she died of a broken heart. She was just ready to go and to not live without him. But I often think, if I'm having, if I'm mentally not in a good space, or if I wake up not necessarily ready to greet the day, I just think about her saying, "Isn't this great? Isn't this fun?" And she always also too, she would let people in her life know exactly like how special they were to her. And she would literally say the words, "You are so special to me." And that's something I'm, just trying to integrate into my life. And I want the people that I love to know how I feel about them, that they are special to me. And all it takes is saying those words, and it can feel really awkward, but like, it's such a beautiful thing to tell people, to say those words to somebody.
Yep. So one of the women you admire believed in you and saw the best in situations and found joy in the small things, and always told you that you were special. That is an amazing treasure. On the opposite side of that coin, has you ever had any bad advice from anyone? What's the worst advice you may think you have? So
the worst advice I've ever received, and I think it comes from a very well-meaning place. But being a young adult, and the older adults in my life saying, like, you have to have a backup. What's your backup plan? What's your backup career? And my response to that would, I was a nurse tech at Spectrum Health for about 8 years. Meanwhile, I was writing in the background. And I was planning on using and I enjoyed being a nurse like at Spectrum Health. It was great, but I didn't have aspirations to be a nurse. I had aspirations to be a writer and a magazine editor. So it wasn't serving my goal, even though it was, it was a financially stable situation. I had consistent work. I had coverage, health coverage. At some point there, I crossed a line where the nurse tech job became my main thing, and writing was just something I would do if I had time for it, if I made time for it. And when you have like a dream or you have goals, that can be a scary place to be when you're putting so much energy into your quote unquote backup. I mean, your backup becomes your main thing, and your dream slowly starts getting further and further away. And once I started shifting my attitude and my perceptions and started really being proactive about my writing and seeing it as a career and reaching out to editors and getting involved in the local magazine scene, that's when I found success. That's when my life shifted. That's when I was able to finally receive an offer on a contract that was enough for me to leave my job at Spectrum. That wouldn't have happened had I not shifted into thinking of that as my main thing. So I think that comes from a really well-meaning place. No one wants a young person to fail in pursuit of their dream and also find themselves in a financially poor situation. So it comes from a good place, but I don't think I would ever tell anybody that, especially someone that's starting out.
Yeah, when you were sharing this with me a little bit before, we talked about when you're cautious about pursuing your dreams, pursuing what you feel is your calling, or whatever words you want to use to describe how passionate you are about writing and making a difference in the world. Whenever we are cautious toward our dreams, it holds us back. There's a level of fear, and we're never all in. And there is a portion to be wise. If you want to build a business or do some type of dream, making money while you're doing it is a great idea, so you don't starve. But at the same point, having that, like you said, when you shifted that to be your number one, everything began to shift. And so there's something about being all in with everything. So thank you very much for sharing these wisdom, your vulnerability today, how authentic you are about everything you do. It shows in the magazine and the interviews that you do with the women and the articles there. So if you haven't, listeners, check that out, do so. Elyse, how can they find that with today? You're not doing printed right now, so tell us more about how they can get in touch with your magazine.
Sure. Yeah. So we are at womenslifestyle.com, and we are putting content on the website on a daily basis. We also are publishing a digital edition once a month. So it's pretty much what our print edition used to be. It's just in a digital space. And if anyone has any ideas for stories, or if they want to reach out, my email address is elyse@womenslifestyle.com. And I would really love to hear from you if you want to reach out. So don't hesitate.
Awesome. That sounds great. And we'll put your links in this when this podcast goes live. All right. Well, thank you again, Elyse, for sharing with us today. It has been a treasure to get to know you better. And again, thank you for your vulnerability.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me today for this conversation with Elyse Wild. She is an amazing woman, and I encourage you to check out her magazine. With all that's going on in the world, it's never been more important, the things we're speaking and where we are focusing our mind. And today, my free gift is my 5 favorite declarations or affirmations. If you only do these 5 every day, it will transform your mind and your world. So it's free on my website, on the homepage. Check it out. I have much more free gifts on my resource page. And join with me in sharing these stories and this podcast with your friends. Get your free gift and share this resource so that we can be an encouragement to all the amazing women out there. And we can know that we are not alone. So until next time, this is Donna, as always, saying live and love vibrantly.
Thank you for joining us on this powerful episode of the You Were Designed for Greatness podcast. Please share this with others who might enjoy it. For more info on Donna Tashjian or to contact her, visit iVibrantLiving.com.